is what I saw recently something that I would consider to be an impressive statistic when it comes to Algorand? I'd like to say yes, personally, in my perspective, because did you know that Algorand recently announced how they have had a total of 0 failed on-chain transactions ever since its launch? Kind of impressive. Or is it not? Well, I like to lean towards yes. But even though I'm not telling anyone to do anything, and even though nothing I say is financial advice, and even though this is just purely my perspective, I'm going to get into why I think this is so impressive actually, and why this could maybe impact Algorand's future partnerships and maybe future enterprise adoption. Even though I'll also talk about the price of ALGO, which is Algorand's native token, and how it's had an almost 10% recovery in the past 7 days. But besides that, let's talk about why 0 failed transactions could matter. Well, it's because a lot of enterprises out there, what do they often care about? Sure, they want something that's fast, something that's scalable, but a lot of other projects out there have that. A lot of other blockchains have that. But what do many of them sometimes don't really have? We sometimes don't see a prolonged historical track record of reliability, in which case 0 failed transactions ever since launch, not ever since 2023 or 2024. No, sir. That's ever since launch right there. So if we take a look at that, that's really impressive. If we take a look at just that achievement right there, not many other projects out there can say that, right? One that kind of comes to mind, in a sense, arguably, even though it's a little bit different, but I'll just use this as an example, the VeChain Thor blockchain. Now, for quite a while, everyone kept saying, oh, Algorand, they don't know if it's that reliable. But we have to think about it. The VeChain Thor blockchain, ever since 2018, allegedly 0 network outages. That right there is considered to be very reliable. So what, suddenly this isn't? I just don't get it. I think it actually is from that statistic only, right? And reliability does matter a lot. Like, let's take a look at, for instance, Toyota. It's known for what? Reliability, right? Sure, it may not be the most interesting or the most coolest car brand of all time, arguably, but it is very reliable, historically, some people would say. I've used this example before, by the way, but I haven't explained it in an Algorand video, so here it goes. So I remember years ago, I remember one of my friends, his dad bought a Lamborghini Murcielago. It was used, but I'm just saying it was a Lamborghini Murcielago. And it was the one that you can open the top, but it's not electronic. The thing is, it's kind of like a tent of sorts. It had these steel things or whatever, and there was a fabric, you can remove it. But besides that, the Murcielago, I remember when I saw it, I was like, wow, this thing looks so cool. It had those scissor doors. But then one day my friend told me, he was like, oh yeah, but we need to change the clutch. And I remember thinking back then, and keep in mind, back then I didn't know anything about cars pretty much. I just thought, oh, it looked cool like that, right? But I remember thinking, what? A clutch? Why would you have to change that? That's the thing. But this was back then. Now with Toyotas, I'm pretty sure after a certain amount of time, you'd probably have to change that too. But at that time, I've never heard that at all. I've never heard that before, right? So I was so confused. And then he was telling me, yeah, after a certain amount of miles, you got to change the clutch and all this. And I was like, what, really? I was like, that's kind of annoying. That's what I thought, right? And I remember, the roof, he would remove it and it would be such a nightmare to try to put it back. So at that point, I was like, okay, now I get it. It's cool, but I don't know too much about the reliability. Now, I'm pretty sure maybe the newer Lamborghinis had a better design or something like that in terms of reliability. I don't know, though. I'm not really into cars anyways. But this was years ago, right? And the Murcielago was a very old model. It was released back then. So I'm pretty sure some of the fundamentals got improved when it comes to the newer Lamborghini models. But I'm just saying, I've never had an issue ever with a Toyota. That's the thing. That's just my perspective. So ever since then, I was like, okay, it's boring, maybe some people like to say, but I like the reliability. That's the thing. That's just kind of my perspective. So when I see Algorand allegedly 0 failed on-chain transactions since launch, kind of reminds me a little bit of a Toyota. Maybe some other blockchains out there, they're kind of like that Lamborghini. Looks nice, looks awesome, looks cool, but who knows about the reliability? Sometimes that's the way I take a look at it. It's kind of like, let's say seeing another blockchain or whatever. It's like a Range Rover. It looks awesome, but is it that awesome if it's in the workshop? I don't know too much about that, right? But that's just the way I take a look at it. But yeah, besides that point though, Algorand I saw at one point as to how it was the technology of choice for over 2,000 global organizations. That's really difficult. And if I take a look at that right there, I don't think that's achievable probably without strong reliability. But I think now we're kind of seeing some of the pieces of the puzzle come into play, or come into place, I should say, right? Because we've seen not too long ago, Algorand, it was mentioned quite a good amount of times in Google's quantum paper. It was actually the most mentioned blockchain other than Bitcoin and Ethereum. Pretty impressive. So in terms of like security in that sense, you know, Algorand kind of maybe is recognized. Also, Coinbase has recently recognized the security when it comes to Algorand. Not to mention Charles Hoskinson. I also made a video on this, but I'm just recapping this, right? But besides that, Charles Hoskinson, the founder of Cardano, the co-founder of Ethereum, even mentioned the security when it comes to Algorand. So we've seen Charles Hoskinson talk about Algorand security. We've seen Coinbase talk about it. We've seen Google, at least in their quantum paper, mention Algorand. So if I take a look at that right there, we've seen the reliability, and also we're beginning to see kind of the aspects of security as well. Now, is this recovery in the past 7 days of almost 10%, is that only just because Algorand has become better recognized fundamentally? Well, I don't think necessarily. We've always known that Algorand has had an aspect of ISO 20022 for a while now. We already know that Algorand, in terms of a layer 1 blockchain, we already know about its scalability, its speed, and all this. But I think the major driving factor is because, now Bitcoin is above 80 grand. Who knows if it can maintain it? I'd be happy if it did. But in my opinion, I think that's kind of the major reason why, as to how Algorand has maybe seen that kind of recovery as of late. But even besides that as well, we have to think about this. When it comes to Algorand, people like to say, well, ALGO, the market cap is still around $1 billion. Yes, that's true. And sometimes people like to ask me, well, how can it ever go back to, like, let's say a market cap of, I don't know, like almost 4 billion, which was seen back in January of last year? My kind of response is that, first of all, the altcoin sentiment would have to return back to where it once was at that time. And I'm assuming if, let's say, Bitcoin, for whatever reason, held up at above 100 grand for quite a while, again, maybe seeing Algo at a almost 4 billion market cap wouldn't necessarily surprise me. But that's kind of contingent on a broader change in market sentiment. People like to say, why can't Algo just go on an independent rally of its own if it's so cool? Well, because the market cap is around $1 billion. It's not a micro cap. That's the thing. If like even 50 million was added to the market cap of Algo, it wouldn't even move it 10%. That's the thing, right? It'd be different if it's like a micro cap where the market cap is like just, let's say, around 50 grand or whatever. Even if it just goes like 500 grand, it's already like 10 times lower before. That's a bit of a different case here. 500 grand or even just $1 million added to the market cap of Algo, it would be like a rounding error, It would just be negligible. It wouldn't really move the needle. It's not a needle mover. That's the way to take a look at it, just because of the size of something like Algorand. So, you know what? People like to say as well, but if it's so dependent on the market sentiment changing, they ask me why I don't just instead care about Ethereum and Bitcoin and that's it. Well, the reason why is because if I take a look at Algo, okay, if it goes back to around a 4 billion market cap, let's just say for simplicity's sake, it's 4 billion, right? We're 4 times lower than that, basically. The thing is, I don't know if Bitcoin is even 2 times lower than its all-time high, because it's actually not, right? It's not even 2 times lower than its all-time high. If Ethereum and Bitcoin recover to their all-time high, it's just more so kind of like a movement in which I wouldn't find too kind of, I guess, dynamic for me. So yeah, that's why I kind of care more so about these mid-tier type of projects. It doesn't give me kind of the anxiety of like a microcap, but at the same time, it doesn't give me the boring vibes of like, some of the bigger projects out there, even though I am not telling anyone to anything. But you know what? If Algo is still around 4 times lower than where it once was in January of 2025, I have zero complaints, because if it goes back to that, do I have anything really to complain about? No. I mean, the thing is, people like to say, well, wouldn't you regret missing out on this random hypothetical project they say that's like a microcap or whatever. You know, I don't feel that type of feeling in a sense where I wouldn't like regret missing out on that because I do not want to look for that. That's the thing. I'm perfectly fine with a random microcap doing whatever as long as I'm still focused on the projects that I'm focused on. You know, they can do whatever, I'm fine with that, right? I focus on my own lane. That's my point of view. However, I'm not telling anyone to do anything, but I'll be sure to make more videos moving forward when it comes to Algorand, and I'll keep everyone updated as to what they post or whatever goes on when it comes to that. So yeah, I want to say thank you for watching, and hopefully I'll see you on the next one. It's been Lee the Captain. I'm a peace. Bye.